Hey everybody, this is Frankie Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report, and this report is about the Electoral College and the cries by the progressives out there now to change it, since they think or believe that Hillary won the popularity vote, the popular vote. This is basically another demonstration in the lack of respect or their respect for the nation and our Constitution. I could think it's more of a lack. Many progressives are out there calling for a total elimination of this electoral college because it did not work to their favor. Prior to the election, they were all for it. And what this demonstrates is a profound ignorance of the constitutional mechanisms that our founding fathers put in place to limit the power of what millions of Americans just went to the polls and fought against, the powerful federal government, giving the power back to the states, back to the people, so that we're not ignored. And there's a reason why this country is called the United States of America. It's because we are not, and I repeat, we are not a direct democracy. We're a constitutional republic. And too many people forget that. And, you know, our founding fathers, they recognize the need for extra layer government. They were also very, very extremely wary of politicians, as I am, as many of you are, because they're wary that they will see it as an opportunity to eviscerate our state rights, which we cannot have. And the Electoral College is a vehicle, a mechanism used to preserve those rights for all of us and to maintain the legitimacy of our democracy. Each party chooses basically how it works is each party chooses an electorate. They go through and the state selects their respective state electors by voting presidential candidates. And then there's limits to what they can do. There's a lot behind the whole electoral college and how they'll vote. There's essentially no constitutional provisions or federal statutes out there that require these electors to abide by the popular vote and in their respective states. It's just not out there. Thus, it's not unsurprising that the ordinary progressives that are out there and the big time celebrities that are crying are circulating these petitions now, which are urging the electorates to go rogue, ignore the wishes of the states and the voters. And they're doing this. One of the primary mechanisms that they're doing this through is the Faithless Now, and it's targeting about 160 electorates in about 15 states. And that Trump had won, coincidentally. And they don't require a commitment to the winning candidate. And they're saying, okay, this isn't required, so you can change. And 25 of the states out there, the District of Columbia and some other ones, electorates are bound by state law. And so it's a little bit different in each state. Now, the odds of reaching a critical mass with that faithless electors that they're primarily focused on is very slim. More than 99% of the electors have always voted or pledged to vote throughout the course of this history to go with the current system that we have in place. They did have one that one time went and joined the faithless electorate and went, instead of voting for John Edwards, they went with John Kerry. But it's a rarity, and it's not something that many people expect to happen. But some Americans out there, you know, the campus crybabies out there, they're canceling classes, exams. It's a disaster. They got counselors out there. You got now these big protests that are being financed by George Soros, and he's busting people in, and they're using thuggery out there, mob mentality, and all this is the idea of democracy. They think it consists of these violent protests that are out there, you know, brutally beating up anyone that's wearing a Trump hat. And they're thinking, hey, if we go out this and we strong arm people, we'll force them to deal with, to change course, to change history. And then you got the progressive media out there. They've discovered that their overt bias, which a lot of them will deny, like New York Times has denied, during the campaign is very likely to result in Trump being talked right past them directly into the American public. And what many people are saying, you know, avoid that progressive left and just go out through alt media and get your message out there. That's why he won. He used social media and ignored major media and was able to get his message out there. I mean, major media has already designated the degenerate Trump and all of us deplorable supporters in every way possible. Generally calling you, if you're a Trump supporter, a misogynist, a homophobe, an Islamophobe, a racist, that whole rant that Hillary went through that one day. And this media, the progressive media, may have just accomplished the unthinkable. And what they did is, by throwing all their support and showing how one-sided they are, they basically enabled their own irrelevancy. And they brought about the rise, even greater rise, of alternative media. And many of the same Americans now are calling for the electoral college elimination. We need to get rid of it. They're out there taking to the streets. Many of those same people were so confident that Hillary would win that they believed that this electoral college would be a firewall for Trump to overcome it. And now that it didn't work in their favor, they're against it. The national popular vote basically further erodes state rights and required the electors. What the electorate does is require the electors to vote based upon the system versus voting upon the popularity. And if you look at it, like Clinton, basically she would have carried states like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, basically New York, California, Illinois. Those three states, if you go with the popular vote, would carry the decision for all of us on who's going to be president. And that's if you go with the popular vote. And that's why you got systems like the Electoral College, so that those three states do not have control over our destiny and cannot decide who's going to be our next president. And Trump, who's now our president-elect, millions of Americans rejected the arrogant and condescending elitist in the government, in the media, in the academia, how they united in their contempt for the bitter clingers, that's us, who populated the country. And rather than coming to grips with it, coming to grips with the fact that they were rejected, these elitists and their followers would rather institutionalize their contempt and effectively turn the national elections into referendums that are controlled by a handful of people. A handful of people in populous locations, like I said, Illinois, California, and New York. Do we really want them determining who our president's going to be and not all of us not having say? That's what it would be in a popular vote, guys. It is precisely the effort to prevent that from happening that gave the rise to this electoral college that everybody's saying is so outdated, that you're seeing up on my screen on how it works. The founding fathers recognized that the direct democracy, there are essentially two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. The wolves basically lost this year. And just like Clinton, it's time to accept it. It's time to move on. You've exercised your right to freedom of speech. Some have gotten carried away, but it's time to move forward and stop the crying and the whining and all that stuff. This has been Frankie with the Uncensored Report.